Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time again. Cliff Hyde just released a WebBot report a few days ago. I've got it. Once again, summary for all my new people. I have to give the introduction that I always give. For all my old peoples, you can just skip ahead 2, 3, 4 minutes, whatever it is. While I describe what the WebBot is briefly, it's a software platform, Cliff High, from halfpasthuman.com, created in the 90s, late 90s. It has an interesting way of forecasting future events based off of linguistics. It's not perfect. It's not 100% accurate, but many times it is accurate, and it's more accurate than you would have if it was just chance, which is why I follow it, because I find that very interesting. You're going to hear me talk about dates this summer, spring, fall, whatever. An issue with the WebBot is that sometimes it doesn't get the timing exactly right. Sometimes it is absolutely spot on, unbelievably right. Sometimes it is not. So for all my new subscribers who are wondering what the hell I'm talking about, stay tuned. And if you want to see some accurate hits, just search YouTube WebBot hit. I'm sure I'll have a bunch of, at least a dozen or more videos on something that happened that the WebBot forecast in advance, such as the rise in price in Bitcoin, followed by silver and gold rising rapidly, which has actually happened. And Friday, we had a large move in gold and silver, as a matter of fact, surprising. So, aside from that, let me get started. Again, I read the summaries. I guess I should say I read the summaries of these reports. I don't read all of it. If you want to get the whole entire report, you have to go to Cliff High's website, which is halfpasthuman.com. Give me 1 second while I shut down Zero Hedge, because it is bugging like crazy right now. So there's quite a bit on this particular report. I think Bitcoin is in this report more than any other report, I guess you could say, that I've ever done. I don't recall seeing Bitcoin mentioned so many times, and I have left out, a portion of that because Cliff High allows me to do these summaries on his report for free. You could buy his reports for like $15. And he tells me, can you keep it to like 30 minutes or less? So I have to cut and pick. And honestly, I cut a lot of the stuff out of the report. So there's some interesting stuff in this one as well. If you want the whole report for $15, again, you can't beat that, because there were days in the past when it was like $300 for a report. Those were early on in the days, and I don't think I bought one back then, but at one point I bought an expensive one when I first started following it, and then right after that he started lowering the price significantly, and it was perfect timing. So here we go. Title of this report is Wild Ride July 2016, but in general this is covering the years from 2016 to 2037. So as I may say something about something starting in 2016 and blah, 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 that just may be kind of a trend where the next year that trend gets worse and it builds up and gets worse, but at least you're going to know about what it is that we're talking about anyways. So metadata. At a metadata level, the new accretion to model space is not forecasting this to be a lazy, hazy summer. Rather, the whole of this report is titled Wild Ride for the explicit references to a very intense, emotionally charged summer of this year. Moving on to the Terra, or world, Earth, whatever entity, which is a kind of a, again, for you new people, it's like a specific set of data on a certain subject matter. Earth, markets, USA population, there's different ones. Starting off with Terra, there's been, in these last several reports, that entity is building and building and building. There's more and more and more, whether it's earthquake, volcanic activity, flooding. As I just recently did a video, told you about a WebBot hit where he said lakes, rivers, things like that would just They're one day, gone the next. We just had one in Chile, as I mentioned in my video. They're today, gone tomorrow. The whole freaking lake's gone. That, again, is a webbot hit. It was called in advance, and it happened shortly after, he talked about it, within a few months anyways. So, Terra entity, of course, the planetary expansion continues to make headlines in spite of never being mentioned in any of the thousands of articles which explicitly confirm its details. Within the new data sets, we also have continued growth for yet major episodes of expansion Terra in dynamic motion. These Terra dynamic are indicated to include yet more long-running rifts or tears in the crust that will be revealing themselves in major alterations to continental topography. And I will tell you, I haven't mentioned this, I didn't do a video on it, but it had to be at least 2, 3, maybe a month ago, weeks ago, a month ago. I saw an article online, it wasn't a big news story, but it was one in which somewhere in America, I don't remember what state or city or county or whatever, but it had rips through the hillside. Wasn't real huge, but it was something that was completely abnormal. Nothing like that had ever happened over there, or as far as they were ever concerned. So get ready for more of that. That's what he's saying. The data sets are continuing to forecast yet more and new volcanoes that will be pushing the populations of the planet around, as the new lands meme is also showing growth via eruption and new landforms made from lava. These new sets are also including heavy references to Japan for new volcanoes. Additional areas in the greater Pacific Basin, including Hawaii, are indicated to also participate in the new lands events, albeit in different forms. Now, before you say, oh yeah, but those volcanoes in Hawaii have been going off, I've seen shows on Discovery Channel where clearly they're making more landmass. Yes, that's true, but Hawaii's never really, as far as I know, mentioned in these webbot reports. Right now is the first time I recall seeing really focused on Hawaii in this kind of talk. So what we're used to seeing in Hawaii ain't going to be nothing, apparently, to what it's referring to. In the case of Hawaii, the data accretion patterns are showing that waves and abnormal currents will be the first indicator for the island populations that something new arises in these sets that are forecast. Winds, the winds. Which, let me stop for a second. Again, new people. I may jump from paragraph to paragraph in order that I wrote it down, but because I'm doing a summary, I may have blocked out a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not even included. So I'm jumping to the next subject that is related to the entity, the Terra entity, but it could be, 2 pages away. So it may not flow, if you will, but just want to throw that out there. Winds, the winds, at least what the data sets are forecasting to be new and to some annoying part of the new life of planet Terra. Straight line winds, twisty winds, tornadoes in strange places, wet, heavy winds, straight down winds, horizontal winds for hundreds of miles, aka wind tsunami, and other form of language imaginable is being applied to winds in these new data sets. Many of these wind references are also storm associated, but there are several, including the straight down and the straight line winds, which are described as clear, no storm, and deadly powerful. The Terra entity is adding a few wrinkles to the old standby of floods. We have flash floods showing up in a large number of sets within the Terra entity and other entities. These flash floods are going to appear to be on 5 continents over these next few months as the flooding rivers from the sky meme gains its new strength and manifestation. These flash floods are showing in rural areas and cities. In all the sets, there are supporting subsets for cars and people and animals being swept away by the muddy waters rushing down. These sets include many descriptors for damage and road destruction and landscape erosion. In several of the sets are pointers to the idea that videos of major highways acting as instant riverbeds will be appearing in some numbers as tourists and locals are fighting for their lives while rivers from the sky dump water beyond our ability to grasp. Other problems cited as arising from flash floods include train wrecks and track dislocations and flooding of government facilities, trapping vehicles, people, and stuff, and scouring away building foundations. Many of the detail sets within the flash flooding show that a large number of vehicles, cars, and trucks are going to be involved in one of these events, in that the flooding is showing as washing away thousands of cars. Further, the data shows that these cars will be floaters and navigation hazards for years after the flash flood event. It's not specific. He's not onto the whole USA pop, or this is kind of globally speaking at this point in this report. Many of the expansion of the Earth and Earth changes datasets are growing with impacts on drilling and extraction of oil. The datasets are describing situations where proven reserves will disappear overnight, very much like sinkhole drained lakes, which again, I just did a Webbot hit video on the other day because it actually happened. A similar effect is the root cause for the disappearances of vast oil pools. Some of the sets referencing these vanishing national resources are also showing that regional wars will be threatened. There are going to be suspicions of illegal slant drilling and other forms of oil theft. On to the global pop entity. Revolution is the operative idea at any level of humanity's journey over these next 18 months. The data sets are showing that the hyperinflation of the major currencies is forecasting a ricochet of the human energy back into the revolution meme. The data sets are forecasting that into a particular someone's life, a politician will fall. Noting the ambiguity of the sets so far, it would seem to be a bit of ways off in time, but the idea is quite clearly of a falling politician who will land on someone's house. No indication just yet as to what the politician falls off from, but the result of the impact will be shattered roof beam, ruptured walls, and a big gooey mess. Other subsets for revolution include political revolution, as immigration becomes invasion and resistance becomes violence. The data sets yet continue to have new growth for battles between government versus citizens, and government versus immigrants, and government versus other governments, and governments versus some other parts of themselves. These many sets are also extensively cross-linked within the global pop entity over to subsets that show food pressures coming later in fall, Northern Hemisphere, 2016. Are also going to be bringing about a situation of government versus damn near everyone, as the shortages created by bad growing weather in 2016 caused something to fail to show up on a shelf near you. These food shortages subsets are at the primary level of support for global pop, described as exacerbating and already tense situations around politics in many Western countries at that time, and being triggers for massive street demonstrations that will precipitate large-scale political calls for reform. The data notes that these soon-to-be occurrences are, even as you read this report, being engineered in a darkened room somewhere below the ground. Europop. The new data sets for Europop have the invasion by camping immigrants of the Rothschild, it says Rothschild lands. That's the second time it's come up as Rothschild lands. Yet I know for a fact it's supposed to be Rothschild, the banking elite family of the Rothschilds. I'm going to have to ask Cliff, is he doing the typo, or is the Webbot bringing back this word as is, Rothschild lands? Moving into shorter term sets as well as its aftermath, which is described as running battles across fields of rapeseed oil crops and through villages. The data is showing that shotgun battles with local farmers will be instigated by the migrant hordes as they fight their way back from the Rothschild thugs/enforcers. The data is showing that the Rothschild property managers will have imported talent and mercenaries come in to evict the squatters, and that is when the countryside erupts. into violence and warfare that shows as lasting several days. In at least one instance, local video capture of the battle scene will be hours long and involve the videographer hiding in a culvert while filming. Other scenes of violent clashes will continue to make it to social media in spite of government interdiction, orders, and intervention. This constant video stream is forecast as producing the Kids with Cams heroes keyword previously discussed in past Webbot reports. These new folk heroes are described as being young, brave, hard, and to be envied or emulated by their peers. The data is showing that their peers, the second generation, does not do so well and suffers greatly. Europop entity has new growth for enclave wars. The Warren/ghetto battles, as the core people's data sets are forecasting that migrant uprisings in many different cities in a coordinated manner will end badly for the migrant population. In several of the sets, the backlash from the local communities are indicated to force the newly arrived migrants away. It is the enclave battles that the data sets show as the initiator of the reverse wave of emigration. Other initiators of diaspora include floods and volcanoes and new sinkholes and crumbling mountains into valleys onto houses/buildings, and other Earth expansion impacts. As Europop runs into the Earth expansion impacts, the datasets are forecasting that the crippling debt levels will crush the insurance companies such that much of the damage does not get repaired, in many cases for years. There are a number of sets indicating that major tourist attractions, some of which have attracted crowds for centuries, are going to be damaged by the pending Earth expansion effects. Several attractions are described as being washed away and scrubbed off the coastline by the floods, while others are to be shaken into rubble as earthquakes and volcanoes cause severe trembling. Canada Pop. This is a short one. The data is forecasting a really strange rest of 2016 for Canada Pop. The details are showing that the feeling of what the hell just happened here will be dominating large segments of Canada Pop over the rest of this year. These question unanswered sets contain supporting data for radiation and other hazardous chemicals and solar radiation and water shortage and poisoning from metals and rust, as in crop disease, and washout from High Mountain Lake in a long run out slide. And more fires, this time in buildings, and seemingly on, with the idea coming up from the detail sets of 1,000 cuts and still continuing feeling emerging within Canada Pop. These sets also contain data for mysterious stuff being involved in all of the officialdom stories that will be used to move Canada Pop about over this year. Caribbean Pop. Caribbean Queen. No, this is not that kind of Caribbean Pop. The data has storms and yet more storms in line for the Caribbean region, but they will not be getting the popcorn storms, which will affect Florida and points north. However, the storms within the Caribbean Pop will also feature revolution and financial revolution and cultural upheavals. These sets have details showing the global financial depression/crash has a dual aspect set going to both good and bad, and that the global depression is not going to significantly disturb those who already are depressed. And further, the reallocation of time and resources by the formerly rich will boost the tourist and expat economies of the region. What attracts the eye to these sets in model space is not the above, but rather some sets indicating that storms will reveal old shipwrecks. One of the two instances noted in the data has fights developing between local salvagers, if you don't know what that is, in island and international officialdom over the recovered gold and silver and art. What is also revealed in the fighting it out in the press during the struggle over gold is that there were bodies which included mummies and stone boxes among the recovered items. These bodies will bring the attention of the USA Space and Science Repression Authorities, who will then themselves be embroiled in local politics while trying to keep a lid on their taking the bodies. That is something to look out for. If you hear about any kind of shipwreck discovery off of the Caribbean, you don't hear me say nothing about it, send old Jason for an email. Contact me and tell me, hey, guess what I just heard today? China Pop. Quite a bit on China Pop, and I had to cut it quite short, but I got 3 decent-sized paragraphs. The new data sets for China Pop are showing that industrial accidents are going to be main topic for national discussions as several accidental fires and explosive discharges will be causing central authorities problems within the moving/relocating of potentially millions of nearby residents. Now, as you know, or maybe not, when China, I'm not sure if it started in 2014 or if it was just in 2015, it may have been just 2015, devalued their currency like 3 times in a row. We don't like that in America, our country, our government, because that makes exports here harder to compete with China because they just made theirs cheaper. And coincidentally, some ports, right off the shore, had massive explosions. One of them was unbelievable. And then it was quiet, and then they devalued their currency again, and then another one happened. Immediately afterwards. Then it was quiet, and then another one devalued again. Boom, another one happens. So you can pretty much, if you got a magic 8 ball, you can ask your magic 8 ball. Magic 8 ball was the USA government or some government doing a little covert operation in China to teach them a lesson not to devalue? Magic 8 ball should reply, it is so. Back to here. The data sets are also forecasting that one of the first ever biological GMO escapees, or just escapes, will take place this summer in northeast China as a contaminated sample from a GMO development laboratory is discovered to have escaped. The data shows that the authorities in the region are caught off guard by the discovery of the escaped creature, and both much time is wasted and much verbiage is caused by the delay in retrieving the escapee. New growth in the sets are indicating that men in white closed environment suits will be seen in the region for months following the discovery of the release, as the authorities become very concerned about some unvoiced fears around the contamination. Within these sets, we have repetitious occurrences of the word mutation, likely not good for the soon-to-be jittery/anxious locals. China Pop has a number of new sets going to the idea that Bitcoin is going to cross the Chinese chasm in 2016 as more than 100 million Chinese will attempt to purchase Bitcoin this year. As many expected, this shift in popular sentiment is forecast to have a very significant impact on the fiat currency price of Bitcoin. The new Chinese Bitcoin owners are described in data sets, by language that includes rabid to own and desperate to gamble on Bitcoin appreciation, and other similar to the panic to own language still growing and penning for gold. The Bitcoin desperation to get language is not only building a picture of the current Chinese owners of Bitcoin being ebullient and joyful and demonstrating public smugness, but now that the data is indicating that a central authority's endorsement on top of the spectacular rise in fiat currency prices is going to push Bitcoin into Chinese mainstream. As the mainstream of China Pop grabs hold of Bitcoin, the data is forecasting that the hardware and phone wallet business is going to escalate beyond the concepts of the people involved. Further, the mainstream acceptance of Bitcoin is also indicated to include use of as currency. So use as currency, especially in the settlement of gambling debts. The data is suggesting that thousands of new to Bitcoin stories will be dominating the Chinese social media over the summer and into fall and into winter and into spring and over next summer. All of the Chinese domination of Bitcoin language aside, the China Pop sets have very large support at several different levels for currency change, noting that the emotional sums within this set are at the extreme end of impact and duration, and that the anticipated spread of impact geographically and the anticipated spread temporally into the future of the impact values for the descriptor of this set are implying that China, likely through the central authorities, is going to make a currency change internally that will ripple around the planet. The data sets in supporting positions point toward gold and silver being involved, as well as a Chinese central bank, and Chinese central authorities, and Chinese foreign policy plans. All of these are being supported by recent history and projections with currency impact to be sustaining for the Chinese central authorities. There are several sets within the supporting linguistics that are forecasting that Chinese stock markets will rally/boost as the ripple effect takes hold from whatever form of change is going to be put in place. Islam Pop. The new data sets about the war within Islam Pop are showing that the House of Saud, or Saudi Arabia, is about to be reduced by half. The reduction is indicated to be economic and to be a severe hit/blow to the viability of the power structure. The pressures on the Saudi kingdom are also showing that someone is going to be shorting the Saudi kingdom to very good effect. My first instinct must be George Soros. The data indicates that this someone is going to be made very rich by their astute financial timing. Not that he isn't already very rich, if it's him. What is most interesting in the data is that the shorting of Saudi kingdom is going to also be a very good temporal marker for the rupture of the financial trends within the central bank controlled markets. This temporal marker precedes the flooding of the gold/silver/Bitcoin markets by the majority of savings funds. USA Pop has some very disturbing sets going to the idea of second guessing our decisions. The emotional sums are indicating that these new sets are going to be at the extreme ends of impacts on the emotional stability of the USA Pop. The idea coming across is that we regular humans start second guessing our investment and other major life decisions as a meme is going to appear that will grab USA by the throat. The meme is described as being about mass mind control and small group mind control by government. The data sets are suggesting that a lawsuit will trigger some disclosure that will in its turn induce yet more lawsuits. The core of the lawsuit is showing as making it past the first obstacles and will be that government is actively using mind control technology in the investment media and on investment managers and other Wall Street workers. The idea from the data is that someone sues the government over what they did to his investment advisors, and thus he was screwed. The data suggests that this suit will be allowed to proceed, at least to the point of generating the mind manipulation meme. The result of the pending suit and the mind manipulation meme are showing as being disruptive to persons working in the financial world as they start wondering if they had been targeted. The data shows that the entire picture of the financial world, of how the financial world works, is going to be put in a state of upheaval and chaos, both internally as above and then externally, as is showing in the very large growth in all things financial or economic within the USA Pop. These data sets are suggesting that the USA Pop is going to be a pawn over the rest of 2016 in the shifting arrangements within the global currency trading. New growth in the economic changes is going to the idea that there is a crumbling of the global economic base while the power elite are busy playing with money. The data sets are accruing for gold and silver markets in disarray with fears of offering within the economic changes subsets. The economic changes subsets could be easily interpreted such as to be called welcome to failed state status or highway to third world hell. Many of these sets are pointing toward a June or summer near solstice northern hemisphere period in which we enter the aggressive decline of the base economy. There are a number of longer term sets within the USA Pop that can be labeled as the Great Hardening, with the understanding of the context as the hardening of the USA Pop in the crucible of suffering. However grim Some of the data sets portray the near-term future of the USA pop during and after the collapse of the financial dollar-based infrastructure. There are areas of universal irony. The data sets are quite clearly indicating that near-term mortality rates rise very rapidly during the collapse, but due to the failure of the just-in-time delivery system and the resulting rupture of the corn-based diet, many within USA pop will end up living longer. Again, though, not that this will be necessarily viewed as a blessing, as there are many years of hard challenges ahead. Part of the hardening linguistics includes sets for a real collapse of the housing market nationally. This has been talked about by numerous robot reports recently, so here it is again. It's still here. The data sets are indicating that in spite of all efforts to reinflate the housing bubble, it deflates as prices start to crater in the high-end markets. The data is indicating that the lower cost areas for housing will hold up better than any of the higher priced regions. This is showing as being true both at the macro and micro level, with the more expensive properties in all markets dropping both faster and further in price than others. At the macro level, this new cratering is described as promulgating side effects in the form of regional real estate depressions. These sets are forecasting that entire regions of the country will become known for their poisoned real estate market. The idea is that overbuilding and underemployment locally and the sudden disappearance of foreign buyers is going to turn some of the previously hottest real estate markets in the country into black holes where real estate, especially condos, go to die. Along with the crashing real estate, the data sets are continuing to build for car dealerships going bankrupt and shuttering. In some sets, we have data for these car showrooms and other dealership properties becoming squatters' housing, as well as being converted into warehouses. Other sets with opportunity include many with retirees who will be seeking to recover pensions. In these sets, the opportunity sets are focusing on going to Washington, D.C. and going to the State House. Much of the language paints a picture of jawboning and pandering to the mobs, and other data indicating that the politicians are lying to save their skin. More of the lying politician subsets are forecasting that there will be a major national effort put forward by the federal government to establish a national environment authority. These sets have data suggesting that there will be a Homeland Security style power grab or power roundup within the desperate federal and state environmental agencies and departments. The idea coming across is that a naked power grab is going to attempt to shove all local environmental government work into a giant federal bureaucracy. These sets are appearing in model space for a rollout in early 2017. However, the data suggests that the groundwork is going to be prepared over the latter half of 2016. There are a large number of sets within these structures supporting the idea of theater and drama being prepared within the environmental crisis area in order to sell the idea of giant federal oversight. Many of these sets are also internally cross-linked back over to the secession movements at the states level. Note Hawaii is especially featured in these sets for environment conflict with federal authorities. Other new sets within the USA pop diaspora sets include references to the resurgence of gas well leaks, as new episodes of methane natural gas spewing from storage containers will be forcing the population from their housing. Other bad aspects for the housing market include the freezing of the credit system, as well as failing government-backed entities. These sets are suggesting that all levels of federal government funding are to be suspect in both purchasing power, as the central bankers create digi-dollars as a hyper rate, and even availability, as many of the funding sources, including taxes, are failing. These data sets are also pointing toward the coagulation and disintegration of the foreign purchasers of real estate in all high-end markets. These sets, in their turn, are forecasting that the concentration of real estate companies, agents et al., are going to be reduced to less than half within a year, as the stream of buyers is described as simply stopping. As model space is progressed through the rest of 2016 and USA pop subsets gain supporting values for riots and opened armed conflicts or assaults, These last can be described as skirmishes between various groups, including law enforcement, police and law enforcement, and heavily armed gangs. Other groups involved are showing up within the supporting sets as near or like similar to law enforcement, which I may be thinking or reading what he is describing as a military contractor. In two separate sets, geographically, we have a near law enforcement group that is showing as starting/beginning one of the strangest and longest street battles yet seen in modern USA pop. These sets are describing a near law enforcement group with near uniforms and weapons that gets into trouble with the wrong group of criminals. They then get backup from real law enforcement, who also then get overwhelmed by the forces they face, and then yet more backup until a very significant portion of the large eastern, he says, yet could be Chicago maybe, city, goes into lockdown as the battling forces take over the streets. The street battle is showing as being won by attrition, in which more of them get killed than us, presumably the police. And things eventually calm down, but not until several blocks of multiple $1-million houses are involved in the sense of shot up or burned down. What many in the USA pop will find even more remarkable is that the very next few days after this happens, I guess, it happens all over again, only this time in another U.S. city. Although it doesn't say U.S. city, in another city. Should be U.S. because we're talking about the U.S. pop. There continues to be growth for government offices being the site for riots, as the welfare system is describing as bending under the weight of the failing dollar. These sets further are indicating that welfare as an institutional view of humanity is going to be assaulted by the propaganda media, all the while that their masters are struggling desperately to keep the system going. The data sets show that the failure of the welfare system will be sporadic and irregular in terms of the when and the where that it will impact. The data sets are showing that the cards will fail as the banks managing the system. Markets entity. The markets entity is gaining new growth around the next phase of the financial markets changes. This new phase is showing as persisting until just about April of 2017. This phase is being defined as the ending conditions period for the U.S. Federal Reserve note. The data growth patterns are suggesting that over the next 11 months, the Federal Reserve note will depreciate to the extent that thousands are required for even small purchases. The vast majority of the data sets within the alternative subsets relate to cryptocurrencies. Specifically, the data sets are forecasting that cryptocurrencies will be the emerging currencies of choice as the old system crumbles about our ears. These sets are forecasting that Bitcoin will become the king of the alternative to paper currencies, followed by Ether, the coin. E-T-H-E-R. Ether, or is that Ether? I believe it's Ether. However, it is worth noting that dozens of other forms of cryptocurrencies will be coming out of these next few years, including all manner of sovereign mined crypto money. So the data sets are showing that Ether, the coin, does gain traction over its other altcoin rivals, but it is going to be a long time before it can come even close to Bitcoin, as the financial collapse pressures of 2016 and 2017 pushed more of the planet into Bitcoin as money mindset. Other crosslinks from the attributes of death, fatalities, murders, suicide are terminating internally within the markets entity in sets for bank workers, insurance workers, crime investigators, and financial executive. These sets are in a linguistic structure that was used many years ago to forecast the wave of bankster suicides, and it appears that new growth in those sets is forecasting that yet again the world will be treated to stories of bizarre suicides by banking elitists. I'm here to tell you, he's absolutely right. He forecasted it through the WebBot program in advance, and we had a string. I think we were in the 20s or maybe almost close to 30 of these banksters found jogging and dead, ran off a cliff in his car, jumped off a building. I covered it all when it happened. So this is why I follow this WebBot report. Again, these will appear to be unwilling assisted suicides. This wave is indicated to begin in late summer in Northern Hemisphere and to continue through to at least the following spring. Nearly a third of all new Bitcoin sets contain hyperinflation subset links or the descriptors held directly. These sets are all Federal Reserve note, aka US dollar, cross-linked, even if their primary reference is to some other form of currency. The implication from the accretion patterns of these sets is that the dollar is going to be under selling pressure, not only from China pop, but also from other parts of the global pop, as the local currencies are tied to the failing dollar. The rate of rise of Bitcoin relative to the failing dollar is showing as taking a very large leg up after Bitcoin passes $650 or so in US dollars. At that point, we can safely assume that the confidence value held by the public globally regarding the Federal Reserve goes to near zero. It's already in the 500s, mid 500s right now. Without regard to hyperinflation language, there are several hints in model space as to how the flow of events may occur. Some of these hints indicate that a period of calm will emerge in the precious metals market over late June that will hold through the solstice. The data sets are showing that this is the period of time of the response from the central bank authorities. Then sometime in early to mid-July, the market's entity is forecasting that there will be a reaction from the response. This reaction is described as being the kickoff that starts hyperinflation in earnest. If model space has progressed through 2016 and all of 2017, and noting that in 2017 model space is primarily populated with longer term values, the data is suggesting or showing that extreme numbers for gold and for silver. Additionally, the linguistic descriptors for the dollar value of Bitcoin are forecasting over 14,000 US Federal Reserve notes for each Bitcoin. At that point, the data is forecasting that gold will just be settling down from having recently doubled from wherever it was at. While there are no numerals in these sets, the period of days there are no numerals in these sets, the descriptors are suggesting that a dollar price for gold at that point had been over 20,000 for some period of days, if not weeks. Note that longer-term data alone is not reliable, and frequently aspect sets are modified by diminishing aspects as they move into shorter-term data types in the broader, more dilute context that this provides. I got to cut this off at this point, but I usually leave out the space goats farts entity. That's just anything crazy, weird, outer space related, aliens, whatever. And I'll make this short and sweet. And this may be a number of years out. I'm not sure exactly when this is going to happen. But there's going to be a mass sighting of what he is describing, and at least the data is describing, as, you know how we take cruise ships? We go somewhere and we see the mammals and sea life, whatever, in the water. There's going to be kind of something, that's how it's described, as a cruise ship, if you will. Not in that sense, but space alien cruise ship in the sky that passes by Earth, not even stopping, just kind of cruising on by. But we can clearly tell this is alien life. This is extraterrestrials, and so many people see it. There's no denying it. Period. It's like not going to happen, and there'll be videos and everything about it. So that's it for this. A couple more videos for you tomorrow. Take care.